Okay, guys, we are back with another episode to just talk a little bit about finding our voice. But before we get into that, I want to read a quote that we found, and it's called Your Voice. Well, it reads, Your voice and your focus are walking in unity together by Fanika Friend.
Mm-hmm. Pastor Fanika Friend.
Pastor, sorry. Ooh, respect on her name.
Yes.
Pastor Fanika Friend.
Yes.
I'm just going to read it again. Mm-hmm. Your voice and your focus are walking in unity together. Mm-hmm. We thought that this quote ties in really well with this whole element of finding your voice. And today we'll just talk a little bit about finding our voice in what? Finding our voice in friendships, finding our voice in relationships, finding our voice in odd spaces.
Mm-hmm. Professional.
Yes, in professional spaces. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Yeah, when she brought this up, I remember the context. When she brought this up, she was, it was at the end of like a mentorship thing that she does. And this was meant to be, it was like a list of affirmations. And this is a list. This is one of the affirmations in the list. Affirming those who are watching that your voice and focus are walking together in unity. In a way that I think we are navigating a very similar thing in the fact that our voices are in places that demand our focus and that have our attention. And so a lot of our journey, or my journey at least, has been like, what does using my voice look like in these spaces, in the spaces that have my focus and my attention? When are the times that I decide to speak up? And when are the times that I decide to be more silent? And in my own experiences, it's been difficult to navigate because, as we talked about in earlier episodes, for many of our contexts, we are one of few or the first, or one of the first. And so for me, a lot of this has been a battle in knowing when to insert my voice, especially when I recognize the context that I'm in and the fact that I am one of few. And so if I don't say something from like an age or racial perspective, if I don't say something, then, will it be said? And am I willing to kind of like let that part of the narrative, whatever I would say, not be heard because of my own fear, anxiety, unwillingness, all those things? Or do I like take the leap and know that it's valuable in the room?
Yeah, I remember an experience to what you're sharing where I was in our culture and diversity class in the master's program. And at that time, that day, if I remember correctly, I was the only person of color, period, in the class.
Interesting.
And we were talking about immigration. So I was like, oh, God.
Yes.
I looked around the room and I was like, and I forget the exact things that we were talking about. I think we were going through an exercise of like pros and cons of the regulations of immigration status or something of that nature. I forget. Yeah. The point of the matter is that I had two hats on in the room where I was a person of color and I was also an immigrant, the only immigrant in the room. And I did not want to speak. I was sitting there and I was like, Jesus, how is it possible for me to like not have to say anything in this class and be able to leave in peace? But I stopped and I looked around the classroom and I recognized that if I chose not to say something, I was doing myself injustice. And I was doing my peers, my colleagues in the room an injustice as well from being able to hear the perspective that I could uniquely share. And I was doing myself an injustice because I was letting fear and just hesitation kind of muzzle or kind of challenge my voice at that time. And then on top of that too, I just plain right didn't feel like being the only one to have to kind of talk in representation of all the people. So it's like a combination of things sitting there going on in my mind. And I find this being a common thread. We had a conversation similar to this before, like in our PhD class, before in our group therapy class of like, how do we choose to maneuver through spaces when you recognize that you are one of the few people of color, and in my experience, and I actually think in all of our experiences in our academic setting and in professional settings, we are one of few people of color. And so our voice carries a lot of weight because we carry stories, we carry experiences of ourselves and others that help to bring a fuller perspective of things. Because one of the things that I'm noticing the more and more I'm sitting with my clients who are of color is that the way how traditionally therapy is kind of set up, it doesn't always fit the narrative of many of my clients.
Exactly.
And as well as like their stories and experiences, not even just my clients, but in general, these unique spaces need an opportunity to fit well.
Exactly.
And so that's why I feel like I've had to force myself out of my comfort zone and advocate for the necessary space that needs to be there in the experiences that we have.
Yeah.
I definitely feel like this topic in particular, finding your voice, is something I often struggle with, especially like you said, like in the classroom setting. I will sit there. I know I have something to say though. I know I have something to say.
And just watching.
And I will just sit there and not necessarily like just observe, because I'm like, okay, what if what I am about to say now, will that change the temperature in the room? What will the reactions be? Like, these are all the questions I have before I even speak. And so, yes, I definitely, this is something I struggle with constantly. And when I think that I found my voice in one classroom, I have 4 other classrooms I need to also find my voice in, because the dynamics are different. And so that's for me, just in the classroom setting, how I completely struggled. I mean, even like this week, I struggled. So yeah, what are you gonna say?
And to that point, as you're talking about with like wondering or contemplating how many people receive it, you know, one of the things that I would like to have, what I would have liked to do to help, like, we're counteracting that, right, is even having a buffer in the class, or having a buffer in workspaces, or having a buffer in conversations, whatever. But oftentimes you don't really have a buffer. So it's just you kind of having to maneuver through and wrestle through, or even taking the brunt of what the reaction might be, which is hard, and which I think makes the risk of these conversations a bit more challenging. But yeah,
you know, this past weekend, I spoke with somebody who's an advisor to me and in these topics, and he told me that when it comes to, you know, finding my voice, that sometimes it's enough for me to just show up and be that person in the classroom, because I felt so much pressure to speak, and I was like, after all the pressure, I'm still not even speaking, but I still walking away with so much anxiety about speaking. And he told me something, and I mean, I guess I could say shout out to Dimitri. He told me that sometimes I just have to show up and be that presence in the class, or be that presence in that space, and that changes the temperature. But we're talking about finding our voice, and so now I have to go beyond just showing up and speaking. So
right. My brain is in many different places. I'm trying to pull out together. First, when Gaylisa was talking, she talked about us being one of few in our context, right, in our programs. And I think it would be easy to think like we are only one of few because we're in Cleveland. And I think it's helpful to recognize that obviously we're one of few in the world, like we are a racial minority, but also within the field, right? There are not a lot of Black therapists, Black MFTs, period. And so the fact that it's not just Cleveland, it represents the field on a larger scale. And so what you said about having clients who don't fit the textbook is a lot of what I've been working with. And a thing that honestly I hope that I can like contribute to the field in shifting these things, because a lot of the standards concerning textbook things don't fit our culture or our context. No. It doesn't fit the Black experience. It fits the white experience, frankly. And so a lot of textbook things get pushed as I'm sitting in session with clients, because I'm like, you know, my textbooks would say, not, you know, textbooks and, you know, people in the field, experts would say do A, B, and C. And I'm like, but this does not fit what's happening. And so it takes a level of built expertise over time to learn how to tweak these things in order to help my clients better, which is my job, right? And so a lot of even the reason why we feel the need, or why we should, I think, bring our voices into the room is because we are at a leadership level representing our clients or just people of color in the room and saying, hey, for the people who don't get to sit here and figure it out, I am the person who, if I don't figure it out, I can't help them to figure it out. Right. My clients will not have the opportunity, may not have the opportunity outside of me to ask these kinds of wrestling questions with what do I do with my life, because many of the answers in the world are for a white normative culture that doesn't fit them. And so for me, that's on top of, yes, I come in and there are plenty of times I'm like, I'm just going to wait because I don't feel like talking. I don't feel like being that one today. I don't feel like being the one who asked the challenging question today that nobody was thinking to ask. But at the same time, recognizing that if I don't, I'm doing myself a disservice in learning, and also potentially doing my clients a disservice in being able to offer them a specific modality or method of doing something because I haven't thought it through yet, even from a personal way. As you were talking, Duranique, another thing came to mind. One of the people, so we've talked about the fact that one of my specialties or my passion places is racial diversity.
Right.
And so one of the leaders in that aspect of the field, he's an MFT, is Dr. Ken Hardy, right? And you'll talk a lot about him when you get to the cultural diversity class. But he has a quote that I love. And he says, for our people, racial minorities, but specifically he talks about Black people. Sometimes he says, I'm going to get the quote wrong, but he says something like, sometimes it just matters that a person has a voice in the room rather than having to pay attention to what they're saying. He says it better than I just said it, but basically what he's talking about is the fact that we should value that someone is, basically we should value the fact that someone is speaking over pinpointing and picking away at what they're saying. Yeah. Because a lot of our experience, a lot of the Black experience is one of learned voicelessness, right? The fact that we are silenced in every context. And so we learn to just sit down and shut up because nobody gonna listen to you. Ain't nobody gonna want to hear what you gotta say. Your opinion doesn't matter. And so we learn to be quiet in, white spaces. And so compounded with academic things and being the first and all the things, we get into the classroom and I don't want to talk.
Nope.
Because I know that my experience is different, and because I'm exhausted from the world and what it's giving me. And so I don't want to speak. And so a lot of what you're talking about is yes, I think we feel pressure in the room to say things and say them well and say them correctly. Right. But there also just gets to be value the fact that my voice is saying something. Even if I haven't gathered it all together yet and it's not cohesive and pretty and it doesn't sound the way that your ears might want it to sound. The fact that I'm saying something, even if it's not the most correct thing in the world, the fact that I'm able to share my experience and that I feel open enough and safe enough to do so says something about the experience. It says something about me and my level of development. And that should be more important than exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I know, I just threw down a lot. I'm sorry.
I was like,
but it really is. It's a compounded issue.
Yeah.
That I think we're talking about on an academic level, but it's compounded racially and concerning citizenship status within the country or not. All of these things get added because it's not just an academic experience, it's personal, right? I'm not talking about something that's separate from me. And all of these things that we're talking about. And finding my voice, it's not let's talk about Billy Bob.
Yeah.
I'm talking about me. And that in itself takes a level of risk and a level of boldness to be able to do well.
That's what I was going to say. I think that's where the intimidation comes in, because now in me speaking up, there's some level of this is going to be personal.
Exactly.
And so this is exposing.
Yeah, right.
This is vulnerable, especially if I'm not trying to be personal or vulnerable.
I mean,
not me personally, but I'm just saying in that space, if if I'm not trying to be that, and this is not, I'm not separating my experiences. If I'm speaking up as a Black voice, my experiences are tied to this. So yeah, this is exposing.
And how dare an academic program to ask therapists to be vulnerable?
Be exposing.
How dare irony. Them? Yeah. How dare them?
Yeah. I love what you said about about it being personal. That is so true.
Oh, it really is. I think in these spaces we find that there are it's again later experiences of finding our voice, because while we are doing this academically and letting our voice be heard in the classroom, we are also, with what we've talked about before, concerning boundaries and those things, having our voices be heard in personal spaces, right? And so we have risk on both sides. We have risk in the professional side that, like, I'm going to say something that no one will agree with or no one will identify with, and so I'm just out on my own having to defend myself or having to prove that something is important enough to discuss and wrestle through, although it's not in a textbook. And then we have the personal side that says, I have boundaries, or I have certain expectations of you, or whatever we want to talk about, reciprocity and those kinds of things, that again demand a level of boldness in being able to share our voices there, and be open with what our needs are. It's a lot of these things are about needs. No?
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just taking it all in because it's tough. Like,
I feel like it's getting real tight.
It's good. I'm like, I think the responsibility often that we have, that I feel, is like, because I have the privilege to be in this space, like I've made it this far to be in this master's program, and I feel it's privileged to be in this space. I should be speaking up because I'm doing a service to my peers. That is sometimes the thought that I have.
Your peers is in your Black peers or your white peers?
I am one of few. So definitely is my white peers. I'm doing a service to them to ask the questions about minorities and how it could be specific to that, to minority groups.
Because I think in the midst of that too, it helps to bring perspective just to the room period. But like, okay, to piggyback on what you said a few moments ago in terms of like sometimes just showing up in the room is significant. When you bring your voice now into spaces with other counterparts who don't share your experience, and what you're sharing now is like even with your white classmates, it helps to inform their lens.
For sure.
Because they are going in some capacity going to be sitting with clients who are going to be in a different cultural or racial context than what they are used to. And I think it's important, and I think it's valuable when we're able, or when we can engage in that process with them to better equip them, which essentially helps the whole system,
right,
and the people that they will come into contact with to be more equipped and more culturally competent as well. The matter of the fact is it's a whole system of involvement to help the bigger picture get to a better place.
But do you hear the pressure in that though?
I hear it, baby.
Yeah. Because you just told me that I now have the responsibility.
See, I was thinking that in my head, but I didn't want to say that because I don't like it.
No, I know this isn't how it should be, but this is how it is in so many other spaces where people of color have to now take the responsibility for the whole system.
The whole system.
Being correct.
Yes, at the same, and I don't disagree, but at the same time, it's also like, to what risk, right? Because yes, I don't want to feel pressure to speak. I think that often leads to some of what we've talked about off air in like tokenism, right?
Yeah.
And I become the token one in the room that represents diversity and what this means, and it's my responsibility to have the voice be heard. At the same time, in the places that I don't speak, what is then the risk that I'm leaving on the table? And the risk is that what I've found often is that while my presence says something, if my voice is not heard, I give other people the ability to create a narrative that I have not created myself, right? And often what that leads to is what's the word? When you assimilation. Like being seen as everyone else, right? When I don't speak up in those ways, there is a grouping that is assumed, right? That is like, I watch this as a child, so that means you watch this as a child, right? And it's until my voice is heard that the differences are starting to be highlighted. Because oftentimes these days, in efforts of not being prejudiced, the what has come out of the desire to not be prejudiced is cultural blindness. And so again, we get lumped into all of these things as being same. And so there's not a question. If I don't bring up the fact that my client, my Black or otherwise client, doesn't fit this, no one will see that they don't fit this, right? And oftentimes it takes we talked about it getting personal. It takes the personal example for them to get it. It's one thing to say my client doesn't fit this thing. It's another thing to say my life doesn't fit this.
Yeah.
Because it's the personal buy-in that helps them to really search themselves more and push themselves to a degree that they would not have if my voice had not said something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of layers here.
Mm-hmm. 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 I think you're bringing up a valuable point, especially in light of the many components that we have to hold, or that we're holding. I'm going to say that we have to hold, but that we just simply
we don't
hold.
have to do nothing.
We don't have to do nothing, you know?
What we do?
We do it. But I think we do it with a great, I think what you're highlighting is with a great advantage, or a great, reward, in that we get to show ourselves, and we get to be known by sharing our voices and our experiences in a way where I think it's a very significant how you're labeling it. It just becomes just kind of muzzled together, it becomes all blended in together, and that's not the case. There are very individual and very unique parts to who we are as people,
Right.
very unique parts to our stories and our dynamics that I think that help to bring beauty to who we are as people as well. And so our voices help to do that. But yeah, let's transition a little bit and talk about what our voices, or finding our voices, look like in other aspects of our lives, whether this might be in friendships, this might be professionally, this might be spiritually, any aspect of your life. What are some of the other areas that you've kind of noticed this struggle with finding your voice?
I just say I don't want to get personal.
I mean, sorry.
But no, yeah, you're right. We gotta go down. So I think in friendships, I think I'm at that point where I'm finding my voice in a more comfortable way than in the classroom, for sure. I think it's important that we have a voice in our friendships to tell people where we feel uncomfortable, where are our boundaries, like we talked about, our boundaries, what are some things that we're not okay with. I think it's a freeing experience when you could find your voice in friendships, and then also somehow I think it connect you and bring you closer when you're able to have that level of honesty. Now, not harshness. Because finding your voice doesn't mean that it's harsh. Finding your voice, I think, means that you're able to reach a level of vulnerability to be honest with your friends. I'm going to use friends in this, with your friends. Now, family, I know, is a whole different story, so I'm just going to leave that for you guys. Not that I don't have. Let me just correct myself right now.
Set the record straight.
Yes, I'm not saying that I don't have a voice within my family. I definitely do. Everybody's family dynamics are different, and so yeah, I think I'll leave that for you guys to carry on.
I think in the midst of talking about this, Danielle highlighted the idea that we were just all together talking about the idea of needs. And in any of those spaces that I brought up in terms of friends, family, professional, spiritual, any of those things, they all, I think, at the root of it, at least I found for myself, that I've had to be more intentional about identifying what my needs are, so that I can advocate for what those needs are, and so that I can feel more comfortable using my voice. And that within itself has been a journey, because I've had to go back to the drawing board of asking myself, what are some of the things that help me to feel well connected, that help me to feel that I can be vulnerable? And I've recognized, like, there's an assessment that I did one time, and I recognized that level of intentionality is something that's important to me. Engagement in understanding what my experience is is very important to me. Understanding those relational components as well, of like, okay, let's engage and do this together. Support is something that's also important to me, and noticing what those things are, they help me to be able to navigate, that's the word, right? To navigate through very tumultuous terrain, and help me to be able to gain some vision for what change could look like if I choose to speak up. So, and all of that collectively too, I think helps to build courage as well, because using your voice is risky. And I think that's what we're identifying with vulnerability as well. There's just a lot of risk in the midst of that. So yeah, I think the root of it, if I'm looking at it like building blocks, is identifying what my needs are and seeing them as necessary enough, seeing them as valuable enough to me, where I'm willing to advocate for it now, which comes through my voice.
I feel like that first part that you said, it was like a 4-step process that you talked about with needs. That is the template right there for how we can find our voice.
Mm-hmm. Y'all, this is tough for me. Clearly, as you can hear, Jernique and Kaylee are all about what their needs are and letting their needs be known.
That's right.
Danielle is not this person, if I'm honest. Danielle will voice Danielle's needs to Danielle and let that be that. And so I think in these spaces, we've talked about finding our voice professionally, academically. Kaylee highlighted on finding one's voice like within friendships. And I think for me, it's been to a degree like finding my voice with myself and letting that be a baseline thing that gets to stand even before I share that with other people. Finding my voice in the way of being honest and admitting certain things to myself, and letting myself be human and giving myself permission, as we talked about in earlier episodes, and giving myself the grace. Finding my voice is reassuring myself of the things that I have landed on before, and letting that be fine. It is a lot to do in other spaces, and it's really a matter of like, at the basic, recognizing these needs, giving ourselves space to have these needs, and then allowing ourselves to voice these things as we become comfortable and more grounded in what these needs are. So yeah, it is a very personal process. But it's a lot of like finding my voice in all these different spaces. And and the thing that's not highlighted often is finding our voice and then sustaining our voice. And so in this process, I think it's a lot of like, yes, I'm wanting to find a voice with myself and with my friends and with my colleagues, at work or whatever else. But not just how do I find it, how do I keep it, right? So how do I not feel the need to convince myself over and over again that my voice is necessary in the classroom? How do I not feel the need to build myself up and take 5 weeks to have a hard conversation with a friend? How do I not just learn what my voice sounds like, but remain assured in my voice and the necessity for my voice, which I think is just a lot of building value in the midst of all of these contexts.
Yeah. I think in each of our different experiences, we've highlighted the tumultuous experience of what it looks like of navigating our voice, navigating the process of finding our voice and seeing the things that we want to vocalize as meaningful and remaining consistent in doing that, remaining willing, or giving ourselves the space to sustain, I think is a really good word you brought up, Danielle, in the midst of doing this. Because I think, at least for me, one of the things I try to keep at the forefront to help to keep me motivated in the process of finding my voice is recognizing that at the end of this, I'm hoping to gain something.
Right.
And if I choose to not do this, what am I losing out on? What am I missing? What am I not allowing for myself to grow in? What am I not allowing myself to expand in because I'm choosing to be silent? And many times for me, that means either professionally, I'm not getting the kind of support I would like to have if I choose not to say something. If friendship-wise, that means that we're not growing, we're remaining stagnant, things are becoming mundane. Spiritually, same thing with God. We're not growing, we're not moving because I am not being open with God about where I'm currently at in my process, my experiences. And so for me, I recognize how much I'm losing when I choose not to. And you get to a point where it's like, I'm tired of losing this. I'm tired of having to sit in this, and I need to fight. And that fight means finding my voice and using it because I want to see change. I want justice. I want to advocate for the things that are important to me and the people connected to me. So there's just some, concluding thoughts, some wrapping up thoughts as we kind of talk about this growing pain for us.
Oh, yeah.
And what this experience.
Capital Pain.
But
yes.
I do want to say, though, I don't think I would be where I am today in the field of diversity. Well, I'm not. I'm just starting.
You are in the field.
Well, yes.
Let's not back down. You are in the field.
In the field of diversity.
Amen.
Or as strong as an advocate that I am today, if I didn't speak up. So I don't want to walk away with us thinking that that I didn't speak up at all. Because I think I would not be where I am today if I didn't use my voice in the spaces where my voice was very necessary to create change.
Yeah, because you've yielded fruit.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, a whole organization.
I think,
my God.
Oh, gosh.
Right.
But I'm yielding fruit is the fruit.
All of my files.
I think what's hilarious, though, is that, so we talk about finding our voice, right? And the journey and the process and all these things. And the same three people talking about the pain of finding our voices are on the podcast. The same three people are always asked to come speak at things or share about things or do presentations, whether it's like through Facebook Lives internationally or on campus or like throughout this community. We are the ones who are often called to share on different things. And we're here talking about finding your voice.
But I think that shows the realness of what we face, though, because I think people may perceive that we are quick to jump to do these things, quick to share, like we are quick to share, and that is not the case. Often this is a struggle for me, to overcome myself.
Girl,
I am overcoming myself every time I stand up in front of somebody to speak. I am overcoming myself constantly, and so I do want people to have the confidence and to step into the space to know that your voice is valued. I think when somebody told me that changed the game for me. So I want people to know your voice is valued. If you believe that you have something to say, say it, and say it with pride.
Say it with your chest.
Say it with your chest.
And say it in
love. Say it in love. And that's the thing I think that's important. I believe that we all have something to add, and so if we add it well, then we're doing our part, like Lisa said. So,
and to kind of conclude all that too, I think as we talked about this idea of permission, I think it's important to recognize that each step of this is an opportunity for us to give ourselves permission to engage, to change, and sometimes even some permission to just remain silent for a minute because it's too much,
and just show up.
And I just need to show up because today I can't do the speaking. And so I think it requires, as we talk about needs too, about giving yourself the permission to actually sit in those things. So thank you guys for listening to our conversation today about finding your voice. I hope that it served you well in some capacity. And we look forward to share some more with you again in our next episode. Have a blessed day with Jesus.